This is me advising the Pope, and I'm sure he cares what I say, but
he watches Gospel Tangents.
I'm sure he does. Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to continue our conversation with Cristina Rosetti. She's a professor at Utah Technical University in St. George, Utah, and she studies Mormons a lot. We'll find out that as part of her studying Mormons, she converted to Catholicism. And so we'll see how Mormonism and Catholicism affected her beliefs and her reasons to study Mormon. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. All right. Well, so that's interesting to hear, because I was always curious about, we did miss the story, and I don't mean to make this like a conversion story, but how did you get involved into Catholicism?
Where did I become Catholic? I started doing my exams for grad school, my doctoral exams, and we have to do 3 exams. We had to do a major field, minor field, and a theory method exam. So my major field was American religion. My minor field was Christian history. And I started reading from the beginning, Christian history.
Okay.
And, the ancient stuff was cool. The medieval stuff I kind of just got through. Now I think the medieval period's rad, but at that time it was
kind of boring.
It was a rough go. Like reading the Rule of Saint Benedict, I was like, that's fine though. Now I have a Saint Benedict medal on my phone. I don't know. Now he's great. But
I think the name Bennett comes from Benedict.
Well,
I don't know if you knew that.
He's rad.
Benevolent.
Saint Benedict is rad. That's an honor.
I don't know anything about him, but we might have to learn.
He has a medal. The whole exorcism prayer is on it.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so I started doing that, and I got to the Reformation, and I read a book called Christ's Church's Purely Reformed, A Social History of Calvinism. And there was a section in it where it's talking about the Radical Reformation, and the Radical Reformation was rough. It was violent. It was rough. I mean, there were these stories about people decapitating statues and feeding the Eucharist to dogs and mocking it. And it was a really difficult, rough period. And I was upset at the radical reformers. I was angry at Thomas Muntzer.
Okay.
Why? I have no reason to be mad at these people, at all. I'm not invested in this story. But
so we don't even know anything about the Reformation until Luther. Is he before Luther?
He's after. So Luther initiates what's called the Magisterial Reformation, and in 1517. And after Luther, there's this big question in the minds of a lot of people in Germany, where people think it's really great that you are kind of starting to change the religion and our place in the church, but what are you going to do, if anything, about our temporal position in the world? And there was a drought in Germany at this time. Things were really difficult, and a lot of peasants specifically called on Luther to help them temporally, not just spiritually. And Luther says no. Luther tells people that are really suffering that your freedom and your salvation is found in God. The rest of it, you're on your own, kind of. And initiates what's called the Peasants' War. And
Luther initiates the Peasants' War?
No, these peasants end up revolting against their kind of temporal situation. Thousands of peasants die in this war. And Luther is kind of very hands-off, but someone named Thomas Muntzer steps in. And Thomas Muntzer is a radical who says, we'll fix your temporal state as well as your spiritual state at any cost. And the Radical Reformation is really marked by this very, as the name says, a radical way of trying to change the world. That Luther has initiated a spiritual change to the world. The radical reformers were going to change the temporal world as well. This manifests in reformers like Ulrich Zwingli. Ulrich Zwingli's in Switzerland. He makes art. He makes art illegal in Switzerland. He puts Catholics in if you can't change Catholics, if you can't reform them, you can kill them.
Wow.
And so Zwingli starts going on, he starts starving out Catholics in Switzerland. And so that the Radical Reformation's a rough time in history.
Could we equate it, because Mormons are kind of familiar with the Crusades, is this like a crusade against Catholics?
Well, the Crusades were really for territory. Like the Crusades were looking to claim Constantinople and Jerusalem. The Fourth Crusade is the reason why the East and the West will never reunite.
Really?
Yeah, fun fact, the East and the West after the split in 1054.
Right.
So there's a split, for those who don't know. There's the Great Schism.
I think most Mormons know that. Yeah.
Okay, the Great Schism in 1054. There was 2 attempts at reconciliation. In the 1400s, there was a final attempt at reconciliation between the East and the West, and it almost worked if it hadn't been for the Fourth Crusade, where the West attempts to take Constantinople. And
is it Istanbul or Constantinople?
It was at the time Constantinople. That's why I said Constantinople. It was Constantinople.
There's that song too, right?
Right. And so the East was like, you just can't stay in your side.
You can't take Constantinople.
No, like why isn't the West just staying in their lane? But
and so the Catholics and the Orthodox really fought over Constantinople, and that's been the reason why they have never been able to reconcile.
That and then the ecclesiastical big differences that the East argues that, which is really truthfully in line with a lot of Christian history. The East argues that bishops should have jurisdiction over a region. So there's a bishop of Constantinople. There's a bishop of, now they're called patriarchs. There's a patriarch over Russia. He's been in the news a lot. The big difference is that the West argues that the Bishop of Rome has universal jurisdiction over the entire church.
AKA the Pope.
The Pope. His name's Francis. Whereas like the Patriarch of Constantinople, Patriarch Bartholomew, doesn't really have jurisdiction over Russia. So he's not like the Pope of the East. But that's kind of a really big difference. And then we have a difference in creed. The East doesn't acknowledge any of the dogmatic.
Well, the East still does. The Eastern Orthodox Church still does infant baptism by immersion, which is crazy to me.
They do.
There's some YouTube videos
infant baptism, though, Lutherans do infant baptism. Presbyterians
but it's sprinkling, though.
Yeah. I don't know what the Oriental Orthodox do. A lot of people do most people do infant baptism. Anglicans do.
Yeah, actually, I remember talking to Kyle Bashirs, and he said he's a Baptist preacher, and he says, us dunkers are actually the minority.
Yeah, the Anabaptist position of like baptizing adults, like the believer baptism, like that's a fairly new thing in history, but comes out of the Radical Reformation. The Anabaptists come out of the Radical Reformation.
Oh, okay.
Which is like Mennonites, Amish, all of them, Hutterites. But yeah, so I read that. I was mad.
And you were just ticked off at all those doggone Protestants.
I was just mad. I just thought, I don't know. I was just upset. And then in a perfect storm, and I really want to emphasize that it wasn't just the history, because I know
you should have become a Quaker. They were all peaceful, right?
Well, this is why I'm a Catholic, though. It's a perfect storm. At the same time that I'm reading for this exam, I go on a cruise.
Oh, to Italy.
Yes.
Oh, I love Italy. Italy's the best
I go
place.
on a cruise. It's like a Mediterranean cruise. We got like a good deal on this cruise. And I finished reading this book. I get on this boat and I got like an advanced, I like booked ahead to be able to take it to the Sistine Chapel. That was cool.
Yeah,
of course.
It was cool.
Of course it's cool.
Yeah.
And while I'm there, I'm like, well, I might as well get in line to go in St. Peter's. I didn't really know what was in there.
Yeah, me neither.
Went in. So I get in line, go inside. I see the Pietà, and I'm like, what is happening? I see the altar, and I'm like, this is it.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is why I was angry. Like, this is why I was so mad at the Reformation. For those who don't know, when you go, there's like, you walk up to the altar, and there's the altar, and then there's like stairs that go under it. And there's a little sign that says, here lies Peter, the first pope. And I was like, there he is. The first pope. The person I was with.
Was he black?
What?
No, here's what I mean by that.
Oh, because he's like Decayed?
Because he's all decayed. So some of those Catholic churches, especially in Italy, I remember like they were mummified remains, and so they
no,
would
so you
just
can't
turn black
see.
from, I don't want to say decomposition, but like,
Yeah, so you can't. So Peter's in a tomb.
okay. So you can't see him.
No,
Because
he's
they
in a
have
tomb.
like glass coffins of these priests, or I don't know what they are.
John
But
23.
they're really gross looking, if you ask me.
Well, those are the great saints of old.
I'm sure they are, but it's just
I mean,
like,
John 23's body was out in, I mean, his tomb is glass. So I saw John 23, who was the Pope that did Vatican II. So I saw him. John Paul II, I couldn't see him, but I saw his tomb. But all the popes are underground or in the crypt, and Peter is kind of like the big one. But yeah, it says here lies Peter, the first pope. And I was like, there's the first pope. His name's Peter. And the person I was with was like, Christina, you don't believe this. And I was like, I've never actually believed anything more in my whole life.
really?
Then Peter's right there, and he's the first pope. Sign me up. So
this was your second, this is
was
born
my
again
second born again
too.
experience. So I mean, this one, fortunately, I think one of the wisdom of the Catholic as well as the Orthodox tradition is the formation period is pretty long. So like whereas when I became Pentecostal, I was like, I want to be this, and they just baptized me like a week later. When I became Catholic, I signed up for RCIA, which is Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults, which is the formation period. And I started RCIA, which is a weekly class, and you have a sponsor that you have to meet with. I started in September of 2015, and I was initiated in March of 2016 on the Easter Vigil, which is the Saturday before Easter Sunday.
Now, my friend got baptized into the Episcopalian Church, and it was Easter weekend. I guess that's a common
That's the
time to get baptized is Easter weekend.
Yeah, so that is the tradition of the church. Is you are what is called a catechumen, so you are kind of in formation, and you go through classes, etc. And
these aren't like just 6 discussions. These are like year-long classes, or how does that work?
well, so I did September to March. It really is up to the discernment of the priest.
So that's just 6 months.
It was just 6 months. So the Orthodoxy is a longer period. That is something that the Orthodox Church does. They really kind of try to do a year to a year in 6 months. I did September to March. It was basically, it was a lot of history. It was a lot of learning about the doctrines. It was a lot of reading the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It was a lot of just kind of learning what it was to be Catholic, learning the creed. That was something I had no idea. We had to learn
The Apostles' Creed?
I didn't learn the Apostles' Creed in Catechism in RCIA. I learned that after because it's the first thing you say to start the rosary. So that's something I learned later. I had learned the Nicene Creed because that's the one we say in Mass every Sunday. So I learned.
Oh, so when you say the creed, it's the Nicene Creed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we say the Nicene Creed every Sunday. And the Apostles' Creed, I end up saying it every day because I do the rosary every day.
Oh, wow.
And so
you're very religious.
I'm very religious now. Yeah. Yep. And ultimately, so then you do
Do you go to Mass every day? Because I know Catholics who do that.
I don't go every day. No, I go I go on Saturday night. But because of the Mountain Meadows Massacre
You couldn't go.
visit, I had to go on this morning. But I usually go the Sunday Vigil, which is Saturday night. And then I go the days of obligation, which in the United States, there's very few. The days of obligation are every Sunday, and then Immaculate Conception, Christmas, and Ascension. But sometimes we transfer that to Sunday. And then when there's like a saint that I really like or a day that I really like, I'll go.
St. Patrick?
No. I went for Aquinas recently.
I found out I'm 1/5 Irish, and I'm like, I guess I should be more excited about St. Patrick.
I didn't go for St. Patrick. He's not my guy. There's some saints that I like. I go to Mass on their day. I have a saint. I choose a saint every year to learn about and to learn the prayers too. This year it's Thomas Aquinas, so I had to do that. But no, I don't go every day. But I do the rosary every day.
Well, you told me something off camera that you wear a veil to church. I was surprised to hear that.
I do wear a veil to mass.
Why is, because, I kind of remember a little bit like there was like, you're supposed to cover your head. So what is so significant about that?
So, I think it's, I know like in other traditions, like in the LDS church, I know there was like a lot of debate around women's veiling
in the temple.
It is a little different in that it's not required to wear a veil. It is an old tradition. So if you were to go to an Orthodox church today, a lot of women still veil. There's kind of still a focus on that. Most women in all women in the Catholic Church veiled until Vatican II, which I want to note for any Catholics watching, Vatican II was a legitimate council that I think made really great reforms.
When was Vatican II?
It was in the 60s.
That's what I
There's
thought.
like a lot of, I don't know, Catholics have their own internal conversations about
You
things.
have your ultra-conservative Catholics that are like,
which is
we don't
not
like
me.
Vatican II.
Yeah,
you
which is
still
not
need to
me.
veil, that kind of a thing?
Right. It's a personal devotion that I've felt called to, and so I do it.
Okay. And is there like a religious reason or just a tradition that women should veil?
Yeah, there's a long-standing tradition in the church of women veiling when they're in front of the sacrament, in front of the Eucharist. Catholics believe in the real presence, believe in transubstantiation. Through transubstantiation, that's the East and the Western Church both believe in the real presence. Catholics explain it through transubstantiation, which I think is rad because I like Thomas Aquinas though. But there's a long-standing tradition of veiling before the Blessed Sacrament in kind of mirroring Our Lady Mary's devotion. I have a pretty intensive devotion to Our Lady. I was consecrated to her in September 2021.
Our Lady Mary?
Mom.
Or
Yeah. Mom. Yeah. Mary.
Mary, the Mother of Christ.
The Mother of Jesus. Yeah.
Okay.
There's like this is a tangent.
Well, that's
we're
what
on
we're
a
all
show.
about. I warned you.
Yeah. I did a consecration to Mary, which is a pretty old tradition of being consecrated to Jesus through his mother.
No, wait a minute. Notre Dame means Our Lady.
It does.
So is that a reference to Mary, the mother of Jesus?
It is. We have
I always wondered, why did they call it Our Lady?
because our Lord is Jesus.
Because I actually took French in junior high.
Yeah, our Lord is Jesus and our Lady is Mary.
I did not know that.
Here we are.
I guess I'm dumb. I wonder how many people
That Notre
knew
Dame.
that Notre
is-
Dame what meant the mother of Jesus.
My students know. Well, we were talking about like Notre Dame, the church, and I was like, Notre Dame of Paris means Our Lady of Paris. It's about Mary. So Our Lady is Mary. But there's like a set, I don't know how to explain this. There's like a tradition of doing consecration, which is being set apart to have Mary intercede for you. And it's a 33-day period of prayers that you learn and of devotions you learn. And then it ends with kind of a big celebration and a big prayer that you are consecrated to Mary on one of her holidays. So I was consecrated to Mary on Our Lady of Sorrows, who is the Mary that I don't know. She's the but the Marian iconography that I'm most compelled by. I really love Our Lady of Sorrows. And so just for all these reasons, I just started veiling and I like it. I'm into it. A lot of people aren't into it. It's also great.
So, but you just do that when you're at church.
Yeah. I just do it at Mass.
do some, can I say good Catholics do it outside of church as well? Like they think
No.
they should always be?
No.
It's only for church.
Yeah, so there are some Orthodox women that veil all the time, but no, it's pretty much just at church. And then if I ever go to Eucharistic adoration, then I wear my veil, which is when Eucharistic adoration is when they put the Eucharist in a monstrance, which is like a gold thing. And people kind of go and do prayers for it. So anytime that I'm in church, I guess I wear it.
Very good. Very good. Wow, that was a deep dive. I didn't
Into my Catholicism.
Yeah, I didn't expect that, but this is good. I think because I will just confess, like Mormons, Latter-day Saints, we can be very, we focus on us, and we really don't care what Catholics do or what Protestants do, and we don't know any of this stuff. I wonder, I'm going to have to do a poll. How many of you knew that Notre Dame met Our Lady and it referred to Mary, the mother of Jesus? I did not know that. So I've wondered that for years, why it was called Our Lady.
I don't think most people know Notre Dame means Our Lady.
I don't think so either, but I took French.
Yeah. So, I mean, you would, but I think I don't think most people would know that Notre Dame is Our Lady. And then if they do, I mean, maybe they would know that it means Mary.
Okay, put it in the comments. I'm curious if you
other
knew
lady?
that. And also if you didn't know that.
What other lady is there?
I don't know. Heavenly Mother? No, I'm just kidding.
Who did you think? No, but I'm curious, who would Our Lady have been?
I don't know. It never made sense to me.
It could have been like the Queen of France.
I mean, I guess I didn't really give it much thought because, I'm still focused on Mormonism, but...
It could have been like the Queen of France.
Yeah, I figured I had something. Well, I never understood the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. Why are we using a French name for the Fighting Irish? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, so Our Lady of Knock is...
Like N-O-C-K? Knock?
K-N-O-C-K is in Knock, Ireland.
Like not the Loch Ness Monster.
No, but I actually don't know where Knock is compared to Lake
Anyway.
Ness. But
Our Lady of Knock.
Our Lady of Knock is the Mary. So we have a tradition of Marian apparitions, of Mary appearing at various times.
Yeah.
In
Our toast and in the clouds and.
Well, but we have ones that are important, like Our Lady of Guadalupe, the one that people see her a lot in the United States.
So Our Lady of Guadalupe would refer to Mary of Guadalupe.
Well, she's the Marian apparition that appeared in Mexico.
Okay.
A long time ago. But it's like a significant apparition because 6 million people converted because of the story. But Our Lady of Knock is the Marian apparition that appeared in Knock, Ireland. So I'm sure maybe there's a connection between Notre Dame and it's the only time Mary.
You're not an Irish Catholic? How can you not be Irish Catholic? Fighting Irish, St. Patrick.
Our Lady of Knock, St. Bridget.
You're an Italian Catholic.
No, I guess now.
Italian/Argentinian Catholic.
I guess now. Yeah. Guess now. But yeah, just Catholic.
Well, I am glad that I got to see the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris before the fire. I'm going to have to go back and see. The one thing I remember,
oh no,
it was just funny because I don't speak French. And they just kept saying, shh, silence, s'il vous plaît. Which means, will you be quiet, please?
Yeah, Francis churches are, I know there's one pilgrimage site in France. It's a church in Paris. It's where the miraculous medal is made, which is this little medal. You are not allowed
It's not a young womanhood medal?
No.
You didn't get one
wonder
of
if the young women's medal was designed after the Catholic medal tradition.
Did they look similar?
No, but Catholics wear medals.
Oh, I always thought they had a cross.
Some people do. I'm just curious. I don't know the history of the young women's medallion, but because Mormons don't wear medals outside of that.
CTR rings.
Yeah. Anyway, you can't talk in that church. You're
okay, there's a dissertation topic for somebody.
The medal tradition of Mormonism. I'd be curious where the young women's medallion, the history of it.
Huh.
Because men don't have an equivalent.
No, because we got the priesthood. We don't need it.
You don't need a medal. You heard it here first from
Which
Rick
brings
Bennett.
up another topic. Let's go there.
You heard it. I just want to say that everyone heard it here first, that men don't need medallions because they have the priesthood. And it's are you saying that the Young Women's Medallion's a consolation prize? That's literally what it sounded like, Rick. The Young Women's program is cool.
I'm not an official spokesman of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Maybe I should just preface that.
Yikes. The Young Women's Medallion is cool. The Honor Bee is rad.
The Honor Bee?
Yeah.
What's that?
It's the other medal that young women get. If you get an Honor Bee.
I don't know about that. I'm sorry.
Rick never went through the Young Women's program.
I did not. I apologize.
It's fine. I think the Young Women's program is cool.
But, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's start to talk. We've been talking a lot about Catholics. which is great. I think it's great. I'm clueless, and I admit I'm clueless when it comes to Catholicism and Protestantism, but this is why I'm learning. Kate Kelly a few years ago made a big deal with ordained women. Mm-hmm. I do know that there has been a movement in Catholicism for ordaining women. Do you have an opinion on that? In either Mormonism or Catholicism or both?
Well, Mormonism is not my tradition, so
you don't care?
Well, it's not that I don't care. It's that I'm not making like definitive claims on what a religion that's not mine should or shouldn't do.
And maybe I should say the Young Women's Medallion would be more analogous to Boy Scout, Eagle Scout kind of a thing. So maybe that was a better thing than priesthood.
That's fair. Yeah. So the Catholic Women's Ordination Conference is very old. I think, if I remember correctly, I think some of the ordained women from Mormonism, I think some of the ordained women people met with the Catholic Women's Ordination Conference to talk about things. I know that there's like a big conference. I don't remember the name of it, but I do know that some LDS women attended, and there was some dialogue between Catholic women and Mormon women about that. To my knowledge, though, there hasn't been I don't know. I haven't seen a whole lot of movement. A lot of Catholic women will show up occasionally to things. I know that the Catholic Women's Ordination Conference was welcomed to a synod to meet with, or to be part of a synod, which is kind of like a big meeting that the Catholic Church is currently having to discuss issues in the church. But I don't think there's going to be any traction with that.
You don't think there should be women priests?
Well, no, I didn't say that. I just didn't say it. I said I don't think there's going to be traction in the church.
It's not going to happen.
There is precedent for, as so many brilliant scholars have noted, there's absolutely precedent for women as deacons in the history of Christianity. There's really not a whole lot of debate about
Phoebe, Priscilla, people like that.
Yeah, there's really not a whole lot of debate about women's leadership roles in the historic church. At least in the ancient period. The medieval period kind of had we see less of that. Although women were doing rad things, like Catherine of Siena, who I mentioned to you off camera, she is like one of the reasons why the papacy went back to Rome from Avignon for a while. So women were doing rad things, but I can see the Catholic Church moving in that direction of eventually having deacons be women.
What would be a deacon's role?
Yeah, so deacons in the Catholic Church can be married. We have some priests that are married. Shock and awe. Our ordinariate priests some ordinariate rite priests are married. Deacon's role is to proclaim the gospel, and so at Mass, deacons will do the gospel reading, which lay people can't do or don't do. Deacons do that. Deacons also help prepare for the celebration of the Eucharist. They kind of assist.
So they prepare the sacrament, basically.
They help lay it out. So they can't bless it. They can't do the consecration prayers. No,
right.
That's very uniquely the priest.
But they set it up.
Yeah, they'll bring out everything.
Bring out the wine, the bread. Or do you use crackers?
We use wafers that are actually in Utah. They're made by the Carmelite nuns in Salt Lake. Huh. They make the wafers here. So they participate in the Eucharistic prayers somewhat, but so I can see a potential for that. I'm not fully convinced that the Catholic Church will see women ordained in the same way that I don't imagine the Orthodox Church doing that. I mentioned my boyfriend's Anglican priest. And
he lives in America.
He's in Canada.
Oh, he is in Canada?
Anglican Church of Canada.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Long distance.
Long distance. I know that the Anglican Church of Canada and the Eastern Orthodox Church a long time ago were in talks about being in communion with each other, which feels so wild when he told me that. And that ended, and part of that was women's ordination was part of that big kind of contestation. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of people that are very hopeful for it. I'm not opposed to it in any way. I think it would be great.
You think it would be great if Catholic women could be ordained?
I do. I don't have any opposition to the ordination of women. But I think the LDS Church would do it first if one's
Fourth
going to do
Catholic
it.
Church.
Yeah. I think there is more of a historic precedent for LDS women to have priesthood authority than Catholic women. I mean, were women formally ordained in the LDS Church? You know, a lot of brilliant people who know way more than me and who are way more brilliant than me have written a lot about this. I think that comments about Joseph turning the keys to the Relief Society sisters and turning the keys to Emma are compelling evidence for the Relief Society being more than something auxiliary and kind of having some kind of priesthood. I don't see the same historic evidence of that being something in Catholic history. So we'll see. Time will tell.
Very good. And opinions on whether LDS should ordain women?
I mean, I don't.
It's not your church, but
It's not my church. It's not my church. I know a lot of women who want it. But I mean, I know a lot of women that say they don't. And I know that position, I know there's like a lot of kind of back and forth on why some women would say they don't. But I know a lot of women who do want the priesthood. And I think there is compelling historical evidence. Time will tell.
Historical compelling evidence for what?
For women in the LDS Church having priesthood at some point. But whether or not it will happen. And I know that there's a lot of also discussion about how in the temple LDS women exercise priesthood. So I think there are avenues for it in the LDS Church in ways that really I don't see in the Catholic Church, because there is no kind of equivalent. We don't have an equivalent to the temple, really. And so in the same way. And so the way that a lot of LDS women talk about exercising priesthood authority in certain spaces, we don't have that. Like, I don't exercise priesthood authority. I don't exercise any authority in my church. None. So, I have like no authority at all.
Why do people become nuns? Speaking of nun.
Why do people become nuns? Fun fact. A lot of people don't know this, but I discerned for a minute, just a minute. We have two kinds of nuns, contemplative nuns, and we have more service-oriented nuns or sisters. Religious sisters are rad. If you've ever met them.
What's the difference? So service is going to be like Mother Teresa, like help the poor, or that kind of a thing?
Mother Teresa, or a lot of like nuns who like teach in schools or like work in hospitals or do various kind of live in the world, like kind of do stuff in the world. Cloistered nuns, you don't see them.
Because they're cloistered?
Because they're cloistered. Because they live lives of prayer. They're cloistered. Like
they just pray all the time?
Yeah. Like the Poor Clares. There's a convent in Arizona called Our Lady of Solitude. And the Poor Clares live there. And I think they start praying at like 4 a.m. I actually don't know that. But like the Carmelites start prayer very early in the morning. Like they pray most of the day. They have to do the full liturgy of the hours. They do Eucharistic adoration. They go to mass. It's a lot of prayer. But I mean, I think for one of the interesting things about religious life, which is kind of our word for consecrated people or people who live lives of poverty, chastity, and obedience. One of the interesting things that is the case historically is during the Reformation. The Reformation removed a lot of convents, and all of a sudden women only had one choice: marriage. That was it. And there was kind of this mourning of any alternative option for women. And monastic life for women was an avenue of independence and an avenue for not kind of having to be bound to being a wife and being a mother. Like I mentioned, there were some really rad women in the history of the church. Again, Catherine of Siena wrote a bunch of letters and got the papacy to go
we need to talk about
to
Catherine
Rome.
of Siena.
But like, she couldn't have done that if she was like a wife and mother. She had.
So she moved the papacy from where to where? To Rome?
There was a whole weird moment where there was 3 papacies.
Yeah.
There was one in Pisa, one in Rome, and one in Avignon.
France.
Avignon, France. And she was really instrumental in saying stop it and convincing everything to just be in Rome in the 1300s. So she was just and there's a lot of historic debate on these people, but there is
And she is your shiro, is that right?
she's my patron. Yeah.
Your patron, that's
She's
what
my
the word is.
patron. Yeah, she's the patron of Europe and me.
The patron saint of Europe and
Me.
Cristina.
Yeah, she's my patron. She's rad. She was a mystic. She was a stigmatist. Her head is on display in Siena, which is one of the main reasons I chose her. I learned about that and I was like, she wore Jesus's foreskin as a ring. She had this mystic vision where Jesus like places his foreskin on her finger as like the betrothal, as a
That
betrothal.
sounds really gross.
She becomes a Dominican.
What's a Dominican?
It's a kind of priest. It's an order, but she's part of a woman's order of Dominicans. So the Dominicans today are kind of in her lineage. She was rad. She was great. And she's my patron. But she didn't have necessarily authority like in the same way like a priest would have, but she had a way of moving through space and operating within the Catholic Church that was not really accessible to women after the Reformation. And so religious life for a lot of women offers an alternative. I mean, a lot of people don't want to get married. And I know from an LDS perspective where marriage is such a focus and family life is such a focus that, and this is a huge difference, I would say, between Catholicism and the LDS Church. A lot of missionaries lead with, you can be with your family forever. And I get told that and I'm like, it's just not a selling point in the same way. Because like this Catholic.
You don't want to be with your family forever?
I didn't say that, Rick. It's just not like the theology is just very different. And so because of like, we just don't have that emphasis. So for a lot of people who like, I mean, one of the hardest things with LDS theology is what do you do with people who don't want to get married? What happens?
They're sinners. No.
But like what happens to them in the afterlife? Like how do you attain celestial?
They'll get married polygamously. No, just kidding.
These options. But like, you know what do you do? Like, I don't want to be a polygamist one day.
You don't?
No. So like what's
wrong with you? No,
I absolutely don't want that. Like, so what happens to me? Like the idea of like requiring a family for exaltation, that's such a foreign.
Well, you have a boyfriend, you're working on it, you'll be fine, right?
But we're not
We'll see you after you and your husband die, and then you'll be a happy forever family.
I don't want my temple work done. Sorry. I just don't. I'm Catholic. And so it's just like there's such a kind of a lot. Religious life was an alternative to that you could be a teacher.
So somebody who didn't want to get married becomes a monk or a nun.
So it was an option. I mean, for nuns who are doing a lot of like service oriented work, or teachers who are XYZ.
But some of these monks seem to like sex.
Monks? I mean, a lot of people
and
like
priests,
sex.
I guess.
A lot of people like sex.
Because we have, the Catholic sex scandals, we have all these.
And I mean, I want to be really clear though that the abuse of children isn't sex. Just want to be super clear with that.
Okay.
And it's a grave atrocity, and it's inexcusable. It's a grave sin that our church has done.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like, if I remember right, and I'm not a Catholic history scholar at all, but it seems like at first it was okay for priests to be married.
Oh yeah.
And then the problem was, when they died, what happens to the estate? Is it the Catholic Church's estate or is it his family's estate? And the Catholic Church was like, we're tired of all these little
also
estate
what happens
problems.
To their spouse.
Yeah. And so that's why they said priests can't be married anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, and this is why Orthodox priests can be married still. They can't be bishops.
But they're not Catholic.
But they can be priests. Well, we have our ordinariate priests are married. Some of them.
Ordinary priest. What is an ordinary priest? Ordinariate.
There are 24 rites, rites, rites of Catholicism. The ordinariate rite, so we have like the Byzantine rite, the Melkite rite. I'm part of the Latin rite because I'm a Western Catholic. The ordinariate rite was a rite that was designed to try to bring Anglicans into the Catholic Church. And so if you were an Anglican priest and you were married and you become Catholic, you can stay married and a priest. And the Catholic Church will.
But that's not fair for people who are lifelong instead of these darn converts.
Yeah, but some people, I mean, there are people who disagree with the ordinariate. I mean, it's a
Okay.
whole other debate. But I mean,
So they'll accommodate conversion essentially.
mhm.
But I mean, there's a criticism of the Catholic Church, and
Yeah,
that
there's a lot of them.
the reason
We are
why we
the
have
great
so
and
many sex
abominable.
abuse scandals is because they can't get married, and clearly,
Yeah,
you
but
know, they have urges just like every other
But I
man.
again want to be clear that not being able to have sex is not an excuse for abuse or rape. And that has like been
Well, but
something.
you've got gay priests, right?
Sure.
And
But gay people aren't rapists
but
or abusers.
no, I understand, but I mean, I've heard.
I mean, I think there's a lot of attempt to explain the problem
Yeah.
with Catholic sex abuse. And I think a lot of the explanations for it end up falling into those categories, which, I mean, we have seen really egregious attempts to argue like why abuse happens by saying, well, men just need sex, otherwise they'll become rapists. No, we cannot.
You can't excuse it that way. But I mean, that's where a Mormon's going to say, well, this whole celibacy thing is just stupid because we're all biological animals, you know. I mean, you know, we've heard about priests having sex with nuns, and you know, and Mormons will chalk that up to just more Catholic corruption or whatever.
Sure.
Those types are, but you know, would you support it if Pope Francis said, "Hey, priests can be married. We're going to set up rules around inheritance"?
Well, I'm not a Protestant, so if the Pope does something, I'm not going to fight it because I'm a Catholic. If I went against the Pope on something like that, I'd be a Protestant.
Well, but the whole birth control things, Catholics aren't supposed to use birth control, right?
No, because of Humanae Vitae.
And so a lot of Catholics use birth control.
Yeah, they do.
So they ignore what the Pope says, right? Are they?
I mean,
are they
Humanae
good
Vitae.
Catholics or bad Catholics?
Humanae Vitae is interesting because there are like some Catholics will make the argument that encyclicals are not infallible. This is a more complicated conversation, Rick, because then I have to explain an encyclical and the nature of papal infallibility.
All right.
But I mean, it's shocking, but religious people do their religion in a variety of ways. Like that's what's so interesting about religion, right? Is that religions will say things, but the way religions are lived, the lived experience of religion is always diverse and different, is sometimes different than the institution dictates. I mean, there are a million ways that people are Mormon or are LDS. There are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who will only wear white shirts to church. There are.
Are you saying something about me?
There are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who are very strict on the word. I know there are members of the LDS Church who drink kombucha.
What's kombucha?
Fermented tea.
Oh, okay.
Or drink tea.
Fermented, is it alcoholic?
It's like very minor amounts of alcohol. It's not like wine or beer. Okay. It's like a very small amount. But even like that, like, does that count as alcohol? Like, there are LDS people who drink coffee because the word of wisdom doesn't mention the word coffee.
They're not good Mormons, though.
Well, but they're Mormon, right? I mean, all to say is, like, yes, there are people who are part of the Catholic Church who use birth control. There are Mormons who drink coffee.
Okay.
And there are absolutely Catholic priests who are abusive, and a grave sin of the Catholic Church is covering it up, and it's inexcusable. And I have no justification for it.
You're not going to defend that in any way. Yeah.
No, I'm not going to try. I'm not even going to try to. It's a grave sin that the church has done and should apologize and continue to apologize.
Pope Francis comes to you and says, "Cristina, I'm thinking about letting priests marry. What do you think?" You'd be like, "I'm totally on board with that, Francis."
Yeah, I mean, if he wants to. I mean, I'm not against priestly celibacy. I'm not convinced that celibacy causes abuse, because I know many celibate people who don't abuse people. I'm not convinced that it is a cause. Like, right, causation the correlation is not causation.
Right.
And so, like, am I opposed to priestly marriage? No, I mean, again, my boyfriend's a priest. Not in the Roman tradition, but my boyfriend's a priest.
He's
a good one.
Is he
a good priest.
Is he Anglican? Does that remind me again?
Anglican Church of Canada.
Okay, well, so they can get married. That's fine.
Right, but I mean, I'm clearly not like priests marrying, get out of town, right? I mean, dating a priest. So I'm not opposed to priestly marriage, but I'm also not opposed to priestly celibacy.
Okay.
At all.
It just seems like, from my point of view, and I usually don't give my opinions, but it's a Catholic church, so I'm not going to get excommunicated. It doesn't matter. This whole idea of...
We do that very rarely. Fidel Castro was excommunicated.
Oh, he was?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that. But this whole idea of the reason why priests have to be celibate is so that they don't have families, so we don't have these inheritance problems in deciding what's the churches, what's the families. It seems like overkill.
Well, and so now there is a sense now that most priests adopt the monastic tradition of being married to the church and being married to a family is hard. It's hard. And I mean, I sympathize for...
Because they spend so much time at church, it's hard to be a good husband and father.
I sympathize for, like, if you're an LDS man and you're a stake president, so you're like married, you have a family, you're doing a lot of service to the institution, and you're like a dentist or whatever you are, right? Like,
you're busy.
You're a busy person. And like at some point, and I think there are people who of course do that incredibly well, I'm sure. But something's got to give at some point. Maybe it's your dental business. I don't know. But that's tough. That's tough. And Catholic priests do a lot of church. We do there's a lot of church that happens at Catholic churches. We don't just do church on Sunday. Church services happen multiple times every single day. And so at some point that would be tough. And I mean, like, we also have, so my parish, for example, has Eucharistic adoration on Fridays overnight.
Overnight?
You can't be a dentist.
Like in the middle of the night?
Yeah. So you can't be a dentist and a husband and a dad of 5 and be at the church overnight.
Well, I understand, but I think
give.
most people would be, okay, so you want to be a full-time priest, pay him a salary, same as we pay our apostles or whatever. They have families,
Ours also aren't paid, though. So in the same way, I mean, they get housing stipends, but with the vow of poverty, that also is tough to be a husband and father if you're taking a vow of poverty. Like, how do you be a husband and father with a vow of poverty?
Why have a vow of poverty?
The sole devotion to God, Rick.
Like, make a living wage.
Soul devote. Rick coming in for the living wage. Rick for president.
We'll give Catholic priests, this is me advising the Pope, and I'm sure he cares what I say, but,
He watches Gospel Tangents.
I'm sure he does. but you give him a fair wage. He can have a family. This vow of poverty just seems kind of silly. Whatever, just let it go. Just be like a Mormon.
You could do that, but we've been doing the vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience for a long time.
Yeah, well.
For a long time, and the Jesuits take 4 vows. They take a vow of obedience to the papacy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're different institutional systems. It would be, given how the current institution stands, I think it would be very challenging with a vow of poverty and with the labor that priests do to also be a father of 7.
Because they don't do birth control.
They don't do birth control. I just think it would be, I don't know.
We got over that in our church. We allow birth control.
Yeah, the LDS church used to, I mean, most churches were until the 1930s. Most churches were.
Well, there wasn't good birth control until the 1930s, probably.
I mean, I actually don't I'm not a scholar of this. That's an Amanda Hendricks Komodo question.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, she knows a
Taylor
lot.
Petrie would know too.
Taylor Petrie would also know. Nancy Ross, I'm sure, would know. She knows a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think they're the different religions. Turns out different religions have different ways of doing them. You heard it here first.
All right. Well, we've definitely dived way deeper into Catholicism than I ever anticipated. But so you are a Mormon scholar. Well, Bagley got mad at him when I called him a Mormon historian. No, I'm a historian of Mormonism. You're a scholar of fundamentalist Mormonism. So I know you read Rough Stone Rolling, but
Yeah.
how did you dive into fundamentalism?
So I read Rough Stone Rolling, and the LDS Church today looks different than it did in the 19th century.
What? Another newsflash.
I'm just full of revelation. It looks different. And
You've got a pretty good, corny Mormon sense of humor. Even yesterday, can you tell that joke again?
what joke?
Remember, we both got to the ballroom and there were no chairs.
Oh,
And so I'm helping you set up the chairs. And what did you say?
I asked if I had the priesthood now because I was doing the chairs.
Oh, no, you welcomed the priesthood for helping with the chairs. Or
Oh,
something
but
like
I
that.
also asked you, I was like, does this mean I have the priesthood now? Oh, no, I think I asked Joey that. And he was
Oh,
like, yes, you do.
okay.
No, I don't think I don't know. But yeah, I needed the priesthood's help.
You've got corny Mormon and joke.
I needed the
Crud
priesthood.
now.
Well, I remember when I moved apartments from just 2 different places in Salt Lake City. And I have a group, it's just a group of friends that I've met in Salt Lake that I became really close to. And I texted everyone. I was like, hey, I really need help moving. Like if anyone's free on Friday.
Call the elders quorum.
Well, and so 2 of the men in the group, one of them was like, yeah, I'll be there. And the other one's like, well, I don't want to lose out on my exaltation, so I'll be there. And I was like, that's a funny joke. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a long-standing joke, but
All right.
everyone helped me with the chairs.
Mormon fundamentalism.
Yeah, so I read Rough Stone Rolling. Obviously, the church has changed in terms of its practice in the last century. And so 2 kind of things corresponded at the same time. I realized that the LDS Church, so I actually, back up. I was interested in Mormonism, talked to my advisor, and she was like, have you met Mormons? And I was like, well, here we go.
No.
So I walked across the street to Institute.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. It was my first encounter with the LDS Church. And I asked the Institute director if I could go to Institute.
Were you Catholic at this time?
I was not.
You were still agnostic face.
I was still agnostic, but I was like, can I go to Institute? And he was so kind. We're friends on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
He was great.
He would have been like golden investigator here.
I know. But I signed up, and the institute that I went to was interesting in that there wasn't very many LDS people. There was only 3 people who were LDS. You got free parking. You got lunch on Thursdays, baked potato bar, which I loved going to. And so
Wait, 3 in your class?
there was 3 LDS people who were in my class. Yes.
Okay, so it was just a tiny class.
No, it was there was only a couple. The only classes that were offered were Book of Mormon, New Testament, and twice in 2 years, they offered Foundations of the Restoration.
This is at Riverside.
Yeah. So they didn't have Eternal Families because they didn't have anyone. There wasn't a need to run that class.
So it was a tiny institute.
There wasn't a need
like.
to run a DNC class. There wasn't a need to run.
Okay,
so it was small.
were there more people that were not LDS that were attending
Yes.
these institute classes?
Oh yeah, there was more non-LDS people for sure.
Really? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, for the parking.
Oh.
It was a lot of athletes, especially, who would use it for the free parking. Yeah. But the director of it was great. And a lot of the class...
They had to pay like $5 for the parking, right? For the class, right? At least that's when I was going there, it was like $5 for the
you
class.
got free parking. And the classes were free.
Oh, we had to
At
pay what we were staying, I think.
Institute?
If I remember right. I think so.
Ours was free.
In Utah.
It was a big sell.
Parking, yeah. I
was a
mean,
big
parking
sell.
can be a big sell at any college.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and lunch on Thursday?
Yeah.
It was usually a baked potato bar.
Yeah, those
which
are good.
I had never had a baked potato bar until this. And it was, yeah, I really liked it. But I signed up for Book of Mormon. I had never read the Book of Mormon. And one of the interesting things,
I think Steve Pineacre still hasn't read it. Jab.
You gotta do Moroni's Promise though, Steve. One of the things that I really appreciate about my institute, though, because there was so few, is the institute director. He actually spent quite a bit of time like going through and asking people like, what are some stereotypes that you have about Mormons? And people would just be like, I heard this, and he would spend like significant time just hearing a lot of wild ideas about his own people and going through them. And I really appreciated that, because that's hard to do, to like stand up and say, what are stereotypes you have about me? And then just like kindly and generously go through them. Like to do that with grace is hard for like a long time, for days on end. And so he was the first kind of LDS person I like really spent time talking to.
Wow.
He's great. And so I did that. I started going to a YSA ward with some of the people in my class. And then as I was doing this, I was reading more about the LDS church, and two things converged.
So you understand YSA culture really well then, I would think.
I mean, I've never been a YSA.
Wow.
I mean, I have been a young single adult, but I have not been in the programming for YSAs. But no, I mean, like, yeah, I went to institute almost every day.
Wow.
And I went to a YSA ward several times. It wasn't until I eventually spent a summer in, like a little over a summer in Utah. And I went to church every Sunday in Provo. The Freedom Stake.
In Provo.
I'm not going to tell you the word because I don't know if the bishop wants that, but I was in the Freedom Stake. So any Provo listeners who know the Freedom Stake.
Why were you living in Provo?
I was doing research at the church history library.
Oh.
And
that's in Salt Lake.
Provo was cheaper.
Oh. Yeah, definitely. But that's quite a drive.
Yeah, I lived in a basement apartment. Well, I took the train.
Okay.
But as I was doing that, two things kind of corresponded. The first was, as I was doing research, reading more, doing archival work, I realized that polygamy didn't end in 1890. I was like, wait a minute, there's more to this story. So I just found out, I realized like, and I know this is not a revelation to most listeners, but I realized that polygamy doesn't end in 1890. And that was fine, obviously.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Cristina Rosetti. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about how she got introduced to Mormon fundamentalists.
A lot of scholars have written a lot about that, and that was interesting to me. And as I'm kind of learning about post-manifesto polygamy, I meet Mormon fundamentalists.
You meet them?
Yeah.
At Sunstone?
At Sunstone, at MHA, at the Church History Library.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, you can hear the audio only at patreon.com/gospeltangents. For just $5 a month, you can hear the entire interview with no interruptions. If you want to watch the entire video for just $8 a month, you can also sign up at Patreon or on youtube.com/gospeltangents and just subscribe here. You can watch the entire video uncut before everybody else. Also, if you'd like to continue to support Gospel Tangents, you can either sign up for our $10 or $20 memberships, or you can get some cool gear like this hat. I've got the coffee mugs like this here. We've got sweatshirts and t-shirts, and I'm even thinking about ties. Somebody said they wanted a tie, so I'll see if I can get that on my store. So go to gospeltangents.com store, and you can get some Gospel Tangents gear. So you don't want to miss that. So anyway, thanks for listening. If you'd like to check out some of our other videos, check out here.